Good morning, boys and girls. All right. Today we are going to do one character, and that is Jessica. All right. Remember, they were in the middle of all that girl drama. Let's see where it goes. All right. Here we go. Act three, scene one. Things weren't going well. I had betrayed Alexia by being nice to Danielle, thinking that this was what Belle Teal would have done. And then Danielle suddenly turned on me without warning. I knew Alexia was behind it. I was alone except for the friends I had in my books, like Belle and Anna. In November, Mr. Turrup introduced us to a book that the whole class would be reading, The Summer of the Swans by Betsy Byers. I had never read this one or anything by Miss Byers for that matter. This book won the Newbery Medal back in 1971, Mr. Turf said. He held the book up. It's not full of action like you guys tend to think of action, but it's a beautifully written book that's going to give us awful lot to think about, learn from, and maybe even change because of. I straightened up. I was excited. Peter moaned. As for Alexia, well, she was somewhere in La La Land. The boys made faces and the girls exchanged glances. Then Mr. Turrup went a step further. We're not just going to read this book, he said. We're going to do an activity with it, an ongoing activity, more like an experience. Now, even Alexia was listening, back from outer space. What kind of activity? Peter demanded. Not some sort of stupid book project, I hope. I hate those. No, no project. I don't really like those things either, Mr. Turrup said. What did you have in mind? I wondered. You're going to make us dress up like a character, aren't you? Alexia said. Oh, I love doing that. Get real, Peter said. Will you guys be quiet and let Turrup finish? Jeffrey said. That worked. No more interruptions. And Mr. Turrup continued. I want you guys to think about this book. In the story, there's a boy with Down syndrome. That's a mental disorder named Charlie, and his older sister, not much older than you guys, named Sarah. They have a pretty special relationship. That's what I want you all to think about. Mr. Turrup stopped for a second, yet somehow we stayed quiet. He continued. So, what you're going to do is visit our collaborative classroom downstairs over the next few weeks. You go in groups in the mornings and the afternoons and simply spend time with these children doing that they do. Mr. Turrup, I raised my hand. What exactly is the collaborative classroom? Still being relatively new to the school, I didn't know. It's where the retards go, Peter said. Now we know never to say that word. Okay? Alexia laughed. I hope you'll answer that question a little differently after this experience, Peter, Mr. Turrup said, his tone very serious. Peter didn't say another word. It's a classroom for children with a range of special needs, Jessica, Mr. Turrup continued. Some of you are probably a little nervous or even scared. That's why you'll go in groups. I hope you'll feel different after two. Act three, scene two. My group consisted of Anna and Jeffrey. I still hadn't quite figured Jeffrey out. On the other hand, I'd been eating lunch with Anna ever since being ostracized by Alexia and her clan. Daniel was back in, I was out. But I didn't want back in. I much preferred my time with Anna. She's quiet, but she's a lot smarter than everyone thinks. She's the only girl smart enough to stay out of Alexia's nonsense. Her mom's advice, she told me. We haven't talked about her mom or any of that stuff I learned from Danielle, and I haven't told her anything about me either. For now, we've just kept our secrets, and that's okay. I like Anna. She'd make a great friend to a character in a book or in one of Dad's plays. I, I know she's going to be a great friend of mine. We were very quiet on our first trip downstairs. Not one of us uttered a single sound. My hands longed to hold a book, but I hadn't bought one, so I bit at my fingernails and cuticles instead. It's funny how, when you're anxious to get somewhere, the journey seems to take forever, and when you're not too anxious, the journey is over in no time. My journey from California lasted about as long as a ride on the Viper roller coaster, and our journey to the collaborative classroom took no time at all either. When we arrived, it was clear the teacher was expecting us. "Hi, guys," she said. "Welcome to our collaborative classroom. I'm Miss Kelly." We introduced ourselves, and then she let us inside. "This is Joey." Miss Kelsey pointed to a little boy with boogers all over his face. "Can you say hi to our friends, Joey?" Miss Kelsey asked. Joey waved in our direction. A gigantic smile stretched across his face. "And this is James over here," Miss Kelsey said, pointing to a different boy. James looked pretty normal to me. He didn't say hi to us, though. He didn't even look at us. "This is Emily over here." The little girl Miss Kelsey pointed to was very cute. She had drool all over her face and hands and arms. She had a different teacher used sign language as she tried to communicate with Emily. The teacher struggled to maintain eye contact with her. She told Emily to say hi. "That's Miss Warner helping Emily right now." Emily tried to say hi to us, but I could tell she wasn't particularly good at talking. There were a few other children in the room, and Miss Kelsey eventually introduced us to all of them. I became distracted at this point because Jeffrey had walked over to Joey and started playing the game memory with him. I couldn't believe it. I heard him say, "That's a great job, Joey. You're really smart." And Joey smiled. Anna and I were on our way out with Miss Kelsey and James and Emily to help them do their jobs. Before we left the room, I saw Joey giving Jeffrey a big hug. Now, remember the character of Jeffrey was really quiet and was not into going to school at all. Act 3, Scene 3. Jobs turned out to be the sorting the plastic forks, spoons, and napkins for the cafeteria. Miss Kelsey poured the utensils on the table, and James said, 712. I looked at Anna, puzzled. "What do you mean, James?" I asked. 712, he said again, looking down at the table. Does he always say 712? I asked. I figured he was yelling out random numbers. "No, James is telling us that there are 712 utensils on the table," Miss Kelsey said. 712 utensils on the table, James repeated, this time looking at Anna and me, swaying a little as he stood there. "Great job, James," Miss Kelsey sounded so excited. "You looked at our friends when you said that." "Miss Kelsey, do you mean James is right?" Anna asked. "Are there really 712? Is that the same amount every day or something?" "Well, I haven't exactly counted them to double check, and no, it's not always 712, but James has never been wrong before," Miss Kelsey said. Anna and I exchanged astonished looks. I was confused. James had done this amazing counting, but Miss Kelsey seemed more excited that he had looked at me. I wanted to ask questions, but decided to wait. I didn't know if anything was appropriate. We finished up the jobs and walked to get Jeffrey. So, just to know, Joey most likely has something called autism, which is what my big brother has. And so a lot of times with autism, you're kind of in your own world, but at the same time, you might have a really unique ability. Sometimes it's with music or art or mathematics. They're hyper focused on one thing, but then the rest of the world they're kind of removed from. So we'll probably talk a little bit about that a little bit more this year. Okay. Now we're almost done. Act 3, Scene 4. Jeffrey was still playing with Joey as well as a couple of other kids now. He was helping them paint. "Jeffrey," I said. He looked up. "We have to go now." "Oh, okay." His shoulders slumped. He turned to the kids. "I've got to go, guys. I'll be back soon." Then it was hug time again. We thanked Miss Kelsey and headed back upstairs. We didn't talk on the way through the halls. I think we each had too many thoughts in our brains. By the time we reached our classroom, Jeffrey was grumpy Jeffrey again, our very own Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I thought. All right, the next one will be Jeffrey. I wonder what his take was. We saw that he was happy there, so we shall find out. So, all right, till next time. All right, bye-bye.